I get asked all the time if I've ever had a shuffle related injury. People come to me about their ankles, their knees, their hips, but I am not an expert in that area. So in today's video, I brought on someone who is. I got to sit down and talk with Joyce, aka the Physio Raver. She is a PT who specializes in helping ravers dance longer and recover faster, because we all know that festivals take a toll. And I learned so much in this video about how mobility can help prevent injury and also help you recover from an injury, how strength training plays a role in how we dance and how we move, and what you should do if you have an injury. So I'm so excited for you guys to dive into this video. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of felt like a podcaster filming this. So if you like this new style of video, be sure to like this video and comment down below. But if you're ready to jump in, grab a little drinky drink and let's get into it. I think the first video I found from you was a video of you talking about the Polly Pocket. And I had for like ever been telling people that I was like, yeah, Polly Pocket is all in your hips, 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 hips. And then your video was like, no, actually it's in your core. And I was like, oh shit, okay. The more you know.
The more you know. No, I'm glad. Honestly, I thought the first video was the one you shared of the me doing like the jumps, like the plyometrics. But yeah, the Polly Pocket one, I think a lot of people bring that up to me actually, like, oh, I didn't know it was from the core. I was
Yeah.
like, if you really think about it, a lot of it's from the core.
No, it's so true. And I've been like keeping that in mind when I teach now and like when I do warm-ups for classes. So useful. We'll kind of get into a few questions here. We'll start kind of with your background. So, how did you get into physical therapy? Like, what was your like introduction to that world?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people have their kind of intro is they've kind of got an injury, they went through PT themselves, and then that's kind of what sparked their interest. But to me, I luckily haven't really had an injury where I had to go to PT for. So how I got introduced to it was more just so I've always had an interest in the human body. And I've always thought it was really cool how muscles, tendons, and everything are connected. And so that's kind of what just drew me into learning about the human body. And I figured physical therapy was kind of the natural progression or next step towards that. And I've always had just a inclination and a liking towards helping people. I think that's really what gives our lives meaning, is to really try to make other people's lives better. And so that's kind of where I saw the intersection between what I like to do academically and what gave me the most purpose. And so physical therapy seemed like just like the natural career path.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So then, what made you niche down even further into like rave dance world and PT? Because I think it's absolutely genius, but I'm like so curious how that idea came about.
Yeah, so I've always really enjoyed raving. I think it's a very good outlet for a lot of people, and it's a very good outlet for me too. And I've kind of discovered shuffling through just watching, people in the back at festivals dancing. And I think that's how a lot of people discover it. You're like, hey, what is this? Like, it's so cool. And then I think also that was the period of time where like Alina Cruz was one of the only ones who was doing a lot of shuffle tutorials and she was blowing up. So I
Mhm.
was like, wow, like I want to do that. And so naturally, I also just had my other passions in music and dancing. How those things kind of came about was actually because I've honestly got really burnt out during my first clinic job, working just like a 9 to 5 traditional physical therapy uh, kind of job in a traditional outpatient setting, because you're typically seeing up to sometimes 20 patients a day, 30-minute blocks, and it's just very, very tiring. And I felt like I just couldn't, like, even though I wanted to, I literally did not have the energy or capacity to help everyone the way I wanted to help them. And you were kind of also restricted by how insurance wanted you to treat. And so I I've always thought that I was too smart for being trapped in a world like that. Like I've always thought that I had more potential. And so kind of the fuel of me being burnt out and then also the aspiration of wanting to do more and making a bigger difference in the world kind of led me to combine these two things. Because I kind of discovered, okay, well, I really do enjoy my job. It's just like the setting that's making me really tired. But also, there is this kind of gap in the raving and shuffling community where kind of taking care of your body, injury prevention, is just not really talked about a lot. And so that's kind of where I saw my passions intersecting and where I could make a bigger difference.
I love that you're doing like basically PT for like ravers and stuff because like, as I'm getting older and stuff, like you just realize like they take a toll on you, but you don't want to stop doing it. I don't want to stop going to festivals. I don't want to stop doing that. You just got to learn to like party smarter, I guess, and like take
Yeah,
care of your body
exactly.
in a better way. So I love it.
Yeah. That's always been my motto. Work hard, play hard.
Exactly, exactly. I'm so here for that. So, was there like any one particular moment where you realized like how important it is for ravers, for shufflers to take care of their mobility?
I think there are a lot of instances that have accumulated in kind of my PT career, but I think some of the ones that stand out the most are when sometimes if I see a shuffler or just dancer in general post-op, like they come in, they have a lot of like stiffness, or for example, like if they had an ankle surgery, a lot of the times their ankle gets really stuck and they can't go through their full motion.
Mhm.
And you can see how limiting that is when it comes to being able to even walk, let alone squat, let alone jump and dance. And then once we start working through that barrier and they kind of gain their mobility back, is when we start seeing more exponential progress. So even though it is like a more extreme example of, getting a surgery, but I think it helps people understand how important mobility is because once you lose it, you're like, wow, there's a lot of things I can't do.
For sure. And I feel like a lot of people who end up having to go through PT is because they've gone through surgery, right? And it's like if perhaps we did more mobility and exercises and taking care of our body beforehand, we could prevent surgery.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's definitely a big part is make sure you're doing the prehab, doing everything you can, and then have surgery be like the last resort. But I think another kind of common phenomenon is just a lot of times, when you go to an orthopedic consult, they're surgeons, right? They're orthopedic surgeons. They're naturally going to be a little bit more like knife happy, I guess. And so they are taught to fix things with surgery versus there are a lot of things we can do before we have to consider surgery.
Yeah, that is such a good point because I've had like a lot of friends who have had like the same surgery multiple times and like it hasn't helped,
Mhm.
And I just have seen other friends who have gone more like the PT route and that's helped them so much more. So I'm sure it's very case by case dependent, but yeah, I think making the point that like surgery isn't always the best answer.
Yes, 100%.
For someone who shuffles or dances but doesn't stretch or train mobility, what kind of injuries are they most at risk for?
Like, well, we want to separate kind of stretching and like flexibility and mobility because they're two kind of different concepts. For people who like if we're just talking about stretching alone, research has shown that stretching itself doesn't really necessarily reduce injury risk. So we have to be careful of saying, oh, like, if you just stretched more, then you might get injured less because there's no scientific backing to that or very like persuasive evidence around that. But mobility is a little bit different because when it comes to mobility, I'll use an ankle as an example again. But a lot of the times, research has shown that if you don't gain back your ankle range of motion, specifically dorsiflexion, which is where you kind of point your toes up,
Mhm.
if you d don't gain that back, you are more predisposed to more recurrent ankle sprains.
Oh, wow.
So that's definitely research backed. And I don't have all the data like in my head about all the other joints, but we can make an educated guess, right? If your mobility is reduced, then you're gonna be more likely to get injuries because you're not as effective in using your joints and your available range of motion, which is gonna make it more easily for you to get injured.
Okay. So, can you describe a little bit like the difference between stretching and mobility? Like, because I think I understand, right? Like, but as far as like maybe specific exercises, like what is a stretch? I mean, I think most people know what stretching is, but I think perhaps people might not know like different mobility exercises.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for flexibility, a really easy way to think about it is it's more passive. So, and it's more like muscle or tendon based.
Mhm.
So if you're doing like a hamstring stretch, that is more to improve your flexibility, is to make sure your muscles can kind of passively stretch and you're able to do that versus something that's more maybe mobility is more active. So you have to be able to actively go through a certain range of motion. And that typically is more joint based. Because typically you don't hear people say, oh, your hamstrings are very mobile. You typically say, oh, your hamstrings are flexible. And
Mhm.
same thing goes for joints. You don't usually say, oh, your hips are flexible. You tend to use your hips are mobile as more of like a description. So that's kind of
Okay.
like a difference.
That makes sense. And then, so as far as stretching goes, so mobility is going to help you prevent injury and help you be a better dancer. And stretching, is that going to help you be a better dancer? I guess like perhaps like with being able to like do higher kicks. I don't know, like I can't think of something as far as stretching versus mobility, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, I was trying to think of examples in shuffling, but I think because a lot of shuffle moves aren't super extreme, it's a little
Right.
bit hard. But some examples I thought of were, for example, like in breakdancing, when they do the windmill, when they
Mm,
have to like really flare their legs, you would probably need a lot of uh, groin flexibility and like hamstring flexibility for that. And, in ballet where they have to do the splits,
mm.
obviously same thing. Like when you have to do a backflip, you also need kind of flexibility in your back to be able to kind of like bend all the way backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. So then as far as mobility goes, what would you say are the top three areas that shufflers should focus on?
I would say hips for sure, especially a lot of cutting shape moves, cowtails, Charleston, W step, all of those, even T step is mostly your hips turning in and out. So
Mhm.
hip mobility is super important. I would say ankle mobility is also very important because just going into like running man, T steps, all of those things, your ankle has to kind of bend and straighten. So ankle mobility is important. And then the last one I would say is your spine. So because a lot of the times if you have to do a lot of big movements where you're kind of bending backwards or crouching forward, you don't want all the motion to just be coming from like your lower body for the movement to look more fluid. You also need your back to be able to move efficiently.
The spine would not have been one that I would not have. The hips and ankles, yep. But yeah, okay, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Um, so what are some like exercises that shufflers can do to help like those mobility in those areas?
Yeah, should I demonstrate them? Should we go
If
through?
you want, yeah, by all means.
Okay, so there's a routine that I think applies more so generally to everyone. Like everyone can kind of do this and benefit from it. So the first one regarding the hips, this is one I think is like everyone should do, and it's good for everyone, where it's kind of like a 90-90
Mm,
hip rotation, where you're kind of just going back and forth because you're kind of getting both directions of the hip. Your hip has to turn in and turn out. And when you're kind of moving this way, you're getting both of those. So that's one I really like to do. When it comes to the spine, one that I really like to do is this half kneeling windmill exercise. It might look a little bit complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. You're gonna have one leg up, one leg down, and pretty much the motion is you have one arm up in the air, other arm you're gonna try to reach towards the ground as you look up to the hand that's up above your head. So what this really does is it forces you to kind of have to rotate through your torso. And how that's important is think about like the Polly Pocket again. You're kind of twisting through your hips and your torso. And so this move ensures you're having enough mobility in those places. Another one I like to do are just these deep knee bends. I like to use these as like a warm up because you're kind of forcing yourself to get into those deeper ranges in your knees, in your ankles, so that when you're going through your running man or any sort of like a pin drop, for example, you've already warmed yourself up into those positions.
Amazing. I love those. I do the 90-90s all the time before like my gym workout. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm definitely gonna add those for my shuffle warm up and definitely gonna add the last two. Those are so good. I feel like some of the most common injuries I hear about are like ankle and
Mhm.
sometimes knees from shufflers.
Yep.
What are like some signs that dancers like might be overdoing it or might need to slow down to prevent injury?
Yeah, that's also a really good question because I think it's a very not talked about topic in just like I think just the dancer world. I think everyone's so it's so ingrained in people to just continue to dance, dance, dance
Mhm.
and to like not stop. It's like part of the culture. But I think sometimes that can become toxic because you do want to be able to recognize the signs of you overdoing it so that you don't hurt yourself. First couple signs that you might see is if there's a decrease in performance, right? If you feel like you just can't dance as hard or you just can't dance the way you used to, that's typically one of the first signs. Some other ones include if your muscles are just perpetually sore and no matter how much you kind of rest, they just kind of, it doesn't go away. That's another one. Some other bigger ones that you definitely want to be careful of is if you start having a loss in appetite, if you have difficulty sleeping, if you start to feel like there's like an elevated heart rate where your heart's beating faster, if you're getting cold sweats, um, and if you're feeling more easily irritable. Those are some of the telltale signs that you might be overtraining and you definitely want to tone it down.
For someone who maybe feels like their ankle is starting to hurt or their knee is starting to hurt, like what should they do? Should they just rest? Should they take a break? Should they focus on mobility? Like what kind of things should they do?
I will say there's multiple parts to that question because it's definitely very nuanced.
Right.
It's going to depend on a lot of things. My philosophy is you want to avoid complete rest at all costs. There are obviously scenarios where that would be necessary. For example, if you and suspect that you fractured something, you probably wouldn't want to continue to walk on it or dance on it. So that would be a case where you'd want to completely rest and let things heal. But that's one of the more extreme cases. Usually you would be able to get around with some sort of activity.
Mhm.
And so a guideline I like to give for people is I like to use what's called the traffic light analogy, where if something is green or like kind of like in the green light zone, it means that there's no pain at all when you do it, no pain at all after. So it's kind of just no pain or baseline level. And when something like when a movement or an activity or an exercise is in the green, then it's safe for you to do. The next category is the yellow light. So yellow is a little bit more the gray area where it's tolerable discomfort. There might be some dull pain, but it's tolerable. You can still work through it and it doesn't linger after. So that's an area where you do want to train in, but you want to be mindful of some other factors. So for example, if you didn't get enough sleep that day, or you're extra stressed, or you didn't eat enough, you're not well hydrated, with all those things in mind, you probably want to stay away from the yellow and stay in the green. But if it's on a good day where all of those things are great, then you can poke the bear a little bit and try to be a little bit more in the yellow. Because uh the hypothesis is the more you kind of stay in yellow, the more the yellow becomes the green.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where it's a little bit gray area, but a place where we kind of want to push towards and work in. And then the last one would be red. So if something is red, that means the pain is sharp, that means the pain is intolerable, and you always want to stay away from it. So if anything is just, ow, that hurts so much, I feel like this is like bad, I shouldn't do it, then you should probably listen to your body and not do it.
Okay, that's good to know. So a little bit of discomfort is okay at times, assuming everything else is all right, but
Hmm.
maybe don't overdo it. And if it's like absolutely so much pain, Steer clear.
don't do it. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I like that analogy. That's helpful. Is there anything that people should avoid doing if they're sore or tight after dancing or after a festival?
Mm. I honestly think it will depend case by case too. Some people have better ta pain tolerance, some people are better trained, and so it's gonna depend. But I would say for kind of like the general population or maybe someone who's more novice who doesn't have a really good grasp of what their body can tolerate, uh, I would just say if you're really sore, very tight after dancing or after a festival, you will want the discipline to stop early or to stop what you're doing and try to not, like, oh, not the one more song or like one more set kind of mentality, because usually that's when people start getting injured. Like, for example, with snowboarding, it's always that last run. It's that
Hmm.
last run that gets you injured. So it's kind of the same here. Your body is going to be more prone to injury when it's tired already. So if you're already tired, you want to have the self-control to not go through that last run or like that last song.
Okay. Yeah. Don't push it. Don't push it. That makes total sense. I definitely am have been a victim of just one more, just one.
Yeah, just one more. It's always the just one more.
Oh man. So what are your go-to recovery tips, either post-festival or post like intense shuffle sesh?
Hmm. I think the common misconception is that, stretching is the like kind of like the biggest thing that should take priority for recovery. But I think what's often the most underrated is sleep and like your nutrition. I think that tends to be the thing that people kind of overlook, where people are like, "Oh, you don't need sleep," or like, if you work hard, you don't sleep. But sleep is when things repair in our bodies. Like we know that sleep is really, really essential, and even just an hour of less sleep will have detrimental effects on our performance. So even though it's not something that's discussed a lot, like sleep is honestly one of the lowest hanging fruits. Like make sure you're getting the 7 to 9 hours of sleep. It's gonna do a better job in helping your recovery than like a 10-minute stretching session.
Right. I mean, it's like 8 hours, assuming you're getting 8 hours versus 10 minutes, it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
and the same with like you mentioned food. It's like, I feel like I think about it sometimes in terms of like diet and like when you're trying to lose weight, like people are so focused on like the gym when in reality you eat 3 times a day. Like that's three
Mhm.
times as many opportunities to like set yourself up for success. And similarly with recovery in any way, like food, so important, and sleep, so important because those are like big parts of our day.
Yeah, that's what I really kind of emphasize with my clients too. Like when you're in the gym, max you're in there maybe like 2 hours. That's 120 minutes, but you still have 24 hours in the day or like 22 more hours in the day that you need to also control because that's a bigger portion of the day.
Yeah, and especially like after a festival when like you probably aren't getting as good of sleep realistically, then prioritizing like good sleep after, so important.
Hmm.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about preventing injury, but now I want to kind of dive into like how to train to be a better dancer. So like improving our athleticism or what have
Hmm.
you. So, how does strength training play into better mobility and better dancing?
Hmm. Strength training, this is what I like to talk about the most because I think a lot of people, it's one of those topics again that's not talked about enough in the dancing world. I think a lot of the times a concept that I've been trying to educate people more on, that again, I think it's just not super well known, is that a lot of the times your muscles feel tight, not because they're actually tight. A lot of times because they're weak. When your muscles feel weak, they can often feel tight. And this is very more commonly seen in more like younger dancers, specifically females who don't really strength train too much. Because I think the other common misconception is obviously as dancers, there's the aesthetic part two, right? You want to look good, and a common misconception is if you strength train, you're gonna get bulky, which again is also not true. But I think that also steers people away from strength training. But a lot of the times, then it's like you get people who are super mobile, right? Their hips can move really well. You can tell they're almost double jointed. They have really good range of motion, but they're reporting, "Oh, my hips feel tight all the time." And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense because your hips clearly are mobile.
Mhm.
So the one last thing that's left is like you're probably weak. And
Wow, that's crazy. I did not know that.
hmm And a lot of my clients I'm working with have this issue. And so I tell them that, and they're also like, maybe they hear it and they're like, oh, I don't know, but okay, I trust you. And then we go through the program, we go through some exercise, and they're like, wait, you're right. Like, I don't feel tight anymore. And so
Yeah.
that really just speaks to how important strength training is in helping people with some of the perpetual tightness they might feel.
Yeah, I feel like strength training has helped me. I mean, so many aspects of my life, but specifically in my dancing. Um, and I used to think it was like gonna take away from my dancing because, I thought I was gonna feel like sore after working out and then not be able to dance as much. But like, once you find a good balance of like a good routine, like I've started doing like full body days rather than like leg focus days. Because if I do a leg focus day, like, yes, I'm gonna feel very sore after and probably not be able to dance. But with the full body days, kind of spreading out the load a little bit, I find that that really helps me. And like when I'm consistent with my strength training routine, my dancing just gets more powerful, but also my endurance increases. Like I just feel like a better dancer.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad that you have a balanced routine. I think that's what everyone should have too. Like there's no one gold standard or no one perfect routine for everyone. You just have to find like what works best for you.
I think the one area I need to improve upon is do focusing on my mobility. that's that's my like I just need to take those extra 10 to 15 minutes like prior to your workout. Do you do it prior to your workout?
Um, there's there's benefits of before or after.
Okay.
If you're not really dealing with an injury, I would say whatever you feel like is better for you,
Okay.
because that's more subjective.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. And then can mobility training actually help someone become a better dancer? Like, will it help them be more fluid, more explosive, or anything like that?
So I think mobility alone wouldn't necessarily, well, mobility might probably help with like being smoother, being more fluid, but I wouldn't necessarily say mobility will help you be more powerful alone. Like
Okay.
it's almost mobility and strength together
Okay.
because they definitely go hand in hand, right? Because if you're mobile, let's just take the hip as an example again. Like let's just say if you have com full range of motion in your hip, so you're mobile, but if you don't have the strength to actually execute and be strong in the entire range of motion, then it's like, okay, you have the mobility, but your strength isn't on par with how much mobility you have. And
Mhm.
so in that sense, you need a strength to also control it. And when it comes to power, it's the same thing. Like let's take a very high box jump as an example. When you do a high box jump, people might think, yeah, you obviously need a lot of strength for that, which is true, but mobility still plays a role because if your ankles are stiff, if your hips are stiff, your knees are stiff, you can't get into a full kind of like squat position to launch yourself up. Like no matter how much strength you have, you're not gonna have the optimal like the prerequisites for you to jump high.
Mhm.
So both of those things 100% go hand in hand all the time.
Okay, so dancers need a balance of both mobility and strength training to
hmm
help improve their dancing.
hmm
I love it.
All about balance.
All about balance. We love it. Okay, so if you could give every raver one mobility tool, whether it be like a foam roller, a massage gun, or really anything, what would it be and why?
I have two.
Okay, that's fine. We'll take two.
Foam roller for sure, because it's just so versatile. You can use it on your muscles, you can use it on your spine. There's just multiple ways you can use it. So I think that's helpful. And the second one would actually just be a tennis ball,
Mm.
because I think the tennis ball allows you to get into like the nitty-gritties or like the small areas where a massage gun just might not actually be able to get to or be as like concentrated and deep.
Mm.
So yeah, I would actually say foam roller, tennis ball. They're also more economical too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So true. I love using a tennis ball like on my calves, like I'll because
Mm,
all in between my knee, pull my knee in and like roll around my ankle. Ooh,
that hurts.
hurts so good, but I swear my calves and my hamstrings are the tightest part for me. I don't know if that's a shuffler thing or if that's just a me thing, but that's pretty much always been the case for me. So I do a lot of like work on those areas. So, what is your personal routine before festival day and after festival day? Like, what are your non-negotiables?
So before festival, I would say my routine, I honestly don't really have like a pre-festival routine because I really believe that the pre-festival routine is the training that you do all year round because
Hmm.
you really can't get much if you're gonna just go on the treadmill 2 weeks before or like you start lifting weight 2 weeks before. Like you're really not gonna see that much change in that short period of time. So it's really about just having a balanced lifestyle, being active all year round so that you're gonna be prepared for any festival that comes your way. And when it comes to a post rave routine, for me, it's just rest.
Mm.
And I think it's again, it's gonna vary depending on the person. And I'm lucky enough to not have any injuries right now. So there's nothing I really like my hip doesn't hurt or my back isn't like in agonizing pain compared to like some people who are dealing with injuries, which is why I can be a little bit more lenient on what I do after. So for me, it's really just about recuperating and resting.
Okay. And then if somebody does have like an injury, like should they ice it? Should they go like really focus on their mobility, like after a festival or something like that?
Yeah, I think if you're dealing with a pre-existing injury, it is also going to be more important that you're doing stuff before the rave,
Mm.
before the festival. Like you're doing your rehab, you're doing your exercises, so you can try to tolerate the dancing, the raving as much as you can during the festival. But afterwards, usually, stretching, anything that can calm down the muscle. So like tennis ball, foam roll stretching, yeah, sometimes icing too. But those things that come post event will also play a role. But what's more important is still what you do before.
Yeah, so true. I love that. And then, okay, we'll get into a few rapid fire questions. What is your favorite post festival meal?
Soup. Specifically, sundubu, which is I think Korean stew or Korean soup.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. I do love soup though. It's just so comforting, so cozy. Like
Oh,
when I'm sick, whenever I just need like a cozy meal. Okay, and what is your favorite festival?
Coachella.
Oh, I've never been.
Basic. I know it's basic, but it has to be Coachella.
That's okay. If it's good, it's good. And then your favorite stretch, if you have one.
The one I demonstrated, the half kneeling windmill is my favorite.
Okay, nice. All right. Well, that is pretty much all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you want to tell people where they can find you or how they can work with you directly, go ahead.
So most of my content and most of what I operate through is just through my Instagram. So my title is the Physio Raver. So you can find me there and I share a ton of tips on recovery, strength training, rehab, everything health and wellness related in the festival and shuffling world.
Yeah, no, she has great content, guys. I'm obsessed. So you Gotta go give her a follow. And we're going to be having even more content on the Shuffle Vault soon. So if you're a dancer, a raver, make sure to follow her and join the Shuffle Vault for even more content. Thank you so much for joining me, Joyce. This was so fun.
Thank you.